What is going on, everyone? Welcome to a new series that I have starting every Tuesday. This is going to be called Talking Tobacco. I'm going to be going over everything I know, some of my tips and knowledge over the T206 set, and hopefully learning a lot from you guys as well in the comment section. Basically, going to be talking about some of the tips that you need to know for collecting the set. Lots of people want to learn more about the set or dive into collecting the set. So I'm going to drop a lot of those tips, as many as I know, in some of these videos. And one of the ones we're going to be starting off with is going to be the different backs. That's one of the most popular questions when it comes to T206s, is the different backs. It can be confusing, so I'm going to try to break it down for you guys. I haven't seen a great type of beginner's guide for this on YouTube, so I figured I'd make one for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy. I'm going to be covering 13 different backs for these cards today, and if you are a beginner, you really only need to pay attention to the first two. Now the two that you're going to need to know if you're just starting out are going to be the Piedmont backs, which is the blue writing on the back, and the Sweet Capital backs with the red ink on the back. Now just these two different types of backs account for 60% of the cards ever graded by PSA for T206s. So about 2/3 of all the T206s you're going to see are going to be in these two backs. So if you're starting out, that's a great way to start with some Piedmont or some Sweet Capital backs. And the Sweet Capital is going to be a little bit rarer. There is about 38% of all the T206s graded are in the Piedmont backs, and about 21% ever graded are in the Sweet Capital backs. Now, it's not actually just that simple to determine how rare a card is on the back. If you don't know, this set, the T206 set, was produced for 3 years from 1909 all the way up until 1911. And there is some different backs that you can get for the various backs themselves. So say for Piedmont back, you can get a 150. We'll say up here in the corner says 150, or it will say 350. This card here, Bresenham I showed, or it can say 350 to 460. Now what does this mean? Since the set was produced in 3 different years, anything that says 150 on the back means it was produced in 1909. That's the only way to tell that it was for sure produced in 1909. So that is like the original print run, basically the first year the set was ever produced. So that is a good way to tell that it is from an exact year. If it says 350, it means it could have been from 1910 or 1911, and same with the 350 to 460 can also be from 1910 to 1911, I believe. So because of this, the 150 backs for both Piedmont and Sweet Capital usually carry a little bit of a premium over the 350 backs. So if you are looking for almost like a slightly rarer variation, you can go for a 150 back, and those are usually a little more desired just because, like I said, from 1909, and that is for certain. And that applies to both the Sweet Capital and the Piedmont backs, like I said. So both of these you can go for the 150s, and the Piedmont especially, although it is a little bit more common overall, the Piedmont 150s are usually slightly more desired because these are the original print runs. Sweet Capital was believed to be a little bit later, but the Piedmont 150 was the original 150 cards produced. So that's why it'll say 150, because in the first print runs of the cards had 150 players in them. And so then when you get to the 350, it was the next 200, so number 151 to 300, and then so on with the 350 to 460. And if you're ever looking, you need some more clarification, PSA website has a very good chart, and I think there's other websites with similar charts that you can find. I'll leave one on the screen here, and it's a good way to track not only just Sweet Caporal versus Piedmont versus other backs, but also the 150s versus 350s, kind of see what ones are more rare, and you can kind of pick out whatever works for you. Now, if you're a beginner, you can basically stop there. I hope I kind of did a good job of explaining the difference between the Piedmont and the Sweet Caporal backs. Now I'm going to move on to kind of the more intermediate type of backs. There's a few in this category that I would put. One of them is the polar bear backs. Polar bear backs have this nice black and white design, and these were produced in 1910 and 1911. And these, what was special about them, what makes them so tough, is they were thrown directly into the package of tobacco, whereas most of the other T206s were slipped in a separate pocket there. And this was thrown directly in like a pack of dip or something like that. So lots of them have tobacco staining all over the place, and it's very hard to get some over a grade of like a 2 or a 2.5, something like that. It starts to get really tough just because they're all stained and all beat up. And those are about, there's been 7,000 graded by PSA, which is about 3.5% of the total T206 is graded. And also something to note for the polar bear backs, there is not very many of the portrait photos. Lots of them are going to be like the action shots here. It's Huey Jennings. But there's not many portraits included in it. Just something to note if you like the polar bear backs, you want to collect some of those. All right, I got 2 more different backs that I would put in this intermediate type of category. These ones are actually fairly attainable, like the polar bear back and these next 2. They are somewhat reasonable. You can get some of the lower level Hall of Famers, some names that are recognizable at least for a couple hundred. They're not cheap for sure, but you can get them, and there's some type of different cool backs, almost like a variation, and they're not completely breaking the bank, so that's pretty cool. I'm going to start off with the Sovereign backs here. Sovereign backs, much like the Sweet Caporal and the Piedmont, were produced from 1909 all the way to 1911. So these do have the 150s, the 350s, and the 460s also. So here is this one's a 350. Got a 460 here as well. These ones are getting tougher to find. It's very similar to the polar bear backs. These are about 3.3% of all the ones ever graded by PSA. It's just slightly less than the polar bear backs. And there's another one that is in the very same category, I would say, the old mill backs. The old mill backs mostly contains lots of the Southern Leaguers, which would be like the minor leagues. So there's not a whole lot of big names in there, but there is some stars like Ty Cobb and some other stars in there included, like Frank Chance and a few other recognizable names. But those are about 3.8%, so right in the same range as polar bear or sovereign as far as how many have been graded. And so I would put those 3 as probably the intermediate type of tier, where you can actually collect a good amount of the Hall of Famers if you really push for it. Now this next kind of tier I have is kind of an upper intermediate tier. If you are a beginner, you don't really want to go down this rabbit hole quite yet. There's a few that I would put in this category, one of them being Tolstoy backs. This one here. This is probably my favorite back design. It's got like a blue, greenish type of back. This one, as you can see, trimmed on all 4 sides. That may give you a clue as to how kind of tough they are. They're less than 1% of all the T206s graded. It says there's about 1,600 ever graded by any player of the Tolstoy backs. And one that's very similar to that is going to be the EPDG back. And that's about the same. About 2,000 of those have been graded. It's like 1% of the T206 is ever graded. That also has a really cool design, somewhat similar to the Sweet Capital with the red print, but has kind of a unique look. And that's starting to get also into the pretty tough back tiers. The final one I would put in that category is going to be the cycle backs. The cycle backs were only 1910 and 1911. They have a 350 back as well as a 460. And it's going to be about 0.7% of the T206s ever graded. Like 1,500 of them or so have been graded. This is starting to get really, really tough. There's not many of these that you come across, even in commons, even in poor condition, can still run you over $100, probably $150, maybe even $200. So now this last tier is basically like kind of just insane ones. If you have expensive taste, you can go for some of these. I'm just going to show some pictures just kind of for examples, but these you almost never run across, even commons. So you have the Hindu backs. These come in the brown and red text, so it comes in like two different types. I don't know too much about those. I didn't do too much research on these because they're very tough. I'll do some videos later maybe on these. There's like 1,100 ever graded of those. There's American Beauty, which actually was a different size than the normal T206s. American Beauty is going to be a little bit taller and a little bit slimmer. So that's something unique about those. They do have a pretty cool look to them. And those come in the 350 back as well as the 460. And then there's some just insane ones that you never even see. There's Broadleaf back. There's 301 of those ever graded. There is Carolina Brights back, 475 ever graded of any players. And the drum back, which you never ever see. 131 of them ever graded, any player, including resubmits. So yeah, that's going to be all the different T206 backs, kind of a basic guide. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this one. This was really fun to make, and I look forward to making these every Tuesday from now on Talking Tobacco. I'll see you guys next time.